Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is with public officials, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Well, as you can see, sitting beside me is Bedford Town Moderator Brian Shaughnessy. And after winning the March 2012 election, and with the election now coming up, it seemed like a great time to get him here. Now, he's been a successful attorney for several years. He has his own law firm in Manchester, Kazin, Shaughnessy, Caston, and McDonald, and I hope I pronounced the two K names correctly. And Brian has been very well known in the legal community here in New Hampshire. He's argued cases before the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and actually there's one going on like right around now. And very, very soon he's headed down to Washington to argue a case before the U.S. Supreme Court. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get him to come back and visit and tell us about all the excitement of doing something like that. So I don't think we have to go too much further than that. No further ado to go right to Brian. And Brian, I have to say to you, after a wild 2012 race, as of March, you became the town moderator. And you've already got two big elections under your belt, presidential elections and everything. So what do you think? How's the experience been?
Oh, it's great. I mean, I even said it during the election season that Bedford is blessed to have the workers they have. I complimented Rick Bullock on the team that he had assembled, and over the years, all the volunteers, including yourself. You did it for years and years.
No, not years and years. I don't know, 4 or 5.
4 or 5 years?
Yeah,
well, in my recent memory. And so it was an easy task to get in and work with people who knew the ropes, and they welcomed me. The challenge was actually the voter ID law.
Yes.
And then the massive turnouts that we had in the
Yes.
November election. But I think all the workers basically pulled their weight wonderfully, and it was a good experience. I learned a couple things, and I'll change a couple things.
Well, talk about jumping right into the fire. I mean, you didn't have time to kind of get used to the deal just with the town election. I mean, obviously the September election was big because of all the state primaries and all that. And then, of course, November being a presidential year and some hot races going on for Congress and such. I mean,
Yeah.
it really was a year you knew you were going to get buried with voters pouring in the door.
Well, the thing with November, I mean, the work that I had to put in coming up to it, because again, I'm new to the job, and I'm an attorney, so I like to actually read the laws and understand
Sure.
it, and don't like to be challenged and not know the answer. So I, read through the election manual and whatnot. But I had to get my arms around the new voter ID law, but then be cognizant of there was a lot of interest in the voter ID law by the national parties. So I knew that there were going to be people from the national parties watching us and challenging any decisions we made. So that was the challenging part, but I was blessed with having 8 attorneys from the Bedford area actually come and assist me. I gave them a little training program, and they pulled it off quite well. I was very grateful for their assistance.
Well, of course, as you know now, in fact, I think it might even be this week, maybe, that they're having a hearing, but there is legislation in, I believe the Democrats put it in, to repeal that state's voter ID law. What do you think? I mean, it hasn't been in effect that long. Do you think it should be given more of a chance, or do you think it needs repealing?
That's not surprising to me. The Department of Justice actually had to approve our voter ID law because we were still on the list from back in 1970, whatever, that anything that we do with our voting laws had to be approved by the Department of Justice because...
U.S.?
Yes.
Yeah.
So our voter ID law got approved by the Department of Justice about 2 or 3 weeks prior to the September, well, it was sometime in 3 weeks prior to the September election. And
really, that close?
Yeah, there was a state challenge too. There was a state lawsuit through the New Hampshire Supreme Court about whether certain things had to be put on the registration form. But this is separate. It was a federal requirement. But they only blessed the first part. As you know, the voter ID is phased in. And for the first election in September, then November, there are different requirements. As we come up to the next year, what's going to happen if nobody has an ID? Not only are we going to have them fill out the challenge voter affidavit, we're going to have to take their photograph and then staple that photograph to the challenge voter affidavit. Right there.
Wow.
And then
that
for
could cost
those
some
forms,
bucks, getting the equipment and everything.
the state has to fund that.
Oh, they do?
So that part of it hasn't been blessed, and I think there are going to be a couple voters out there that may take exception with the fact that their image is being captured somehow.
Yeah.
Now the law does build in a requirement that once we take that picture with the digital photo camera that's supplied by the state, we are then supposed to erase it right there in front of the voter. So,
really?
So we're not retaining it for some other purpose. But and then, as the law goes forward, we're supposed to send those up to the state, and then the Attorney General's office follows up with the Secretary of State to see, did the person really vote? They send them a letter, and if they don't get it back, they have to investigate.
Wow. So that could
It's
be
a big
cumbersome.
process.
Yeah.
And that part has not been blessed by the Department of Justice officials, so I'm not sure how that will come down. I haven't heard anything further about that.
What do you think? You think, now that the Democrats are in the majority in the House, that they'll pull off a repeal? Because, it was kind of regarded, I think, as a Republican move more than anything.
And I saw a lot of the opposition to that from the Democratic side as a voter suppression type of thing. I think in Bedford we really don't have as much of a problem. There aren't too many people without IDs of some sort.
True. Yeah.
And our general population is more wealthy than the inner cities, or there are other states that have done voter ID where there comes more of a problem. So we didn't see anywhere near the problems that other states may have seen. So I don't know. I don't know what will happen in the legislature, but they're going back and repealing a bunch of things that have been passed. So we'll see how that one plays out.
I know.
I personally, I see no problems with it. I didn't see any problems with applying it to the voters that day, and there was only maybe 20 or 30 people that raised any objection at that point. Doesn't mean that there aren't more that have it, but nobody really
Well, to me, it never seemed like a big deal. And it's funny because, obviously a lot of people are used to it from other states because generally when I did, volunteer to work at the polls, I would be at that back checkout. And when people would come to say their names, it was amazing how many of them would have their driver's license and go to hand it to me. And I'd say, I don't need that. And, oh, really? Oh, I thought I had to, because in their home state that they came from, they did have to turn it in.
Right.
So it didn't seem like it was a big issue to people.
Well, the issue is whether it's constitutional. And it's actually goes hand in hand with the issue that I came here to talk to you about today, too, is the right to vote.
Yes.
And what happens is the right to vote is so central to our democracy, and it's held in such high regard and esteem, and it's protected by the laws. If you're putting up any type of impediment, now, I don't think it has anything to do with like the Jim Crow days and when you're having a test to see if you're literate.
Yeah,
those were definitely geared towards suppressing voter turnout and the minorities not to vote and whatnot. I don't look at the voter ID as that type of law, but that's the argument, that any impediment put in the way of somebody who wants to vote it has to pass strict scrutiny under constitutional analysis, and that's a pretty high burden. The state has to show a compelling state interest in order to have something impinge upon a fundamental interest like that.
Well, now, of course, I know that the town moderator sets the rules for appropriate behavior both inside the polling location as well as in the area surrounding it outside. What kind of rules did you set up or think about setting up for activity outside of the polls, such as, the handing out of campaign literature or people wearing campaign buttons or pins standing, near the doorways or whatever? I know inside, I have no idea if it's a regulation or not, but I think generally people accept that if you're working as a volunteer or something inside the polls, you're kind of not supposed to be having campaign buttons and such on. But as far as everybody else goes, did you, change anything or set up some new stuff? Or
I didn't change anything, but like I said, I read all the laws as they apply. And I did have a concern regarding the requirement that a voter coming into the polls actually remove a button. So say you have a little campaign button that you wear around.
Now, was that a local requirement? Was this something they did before?
They've always done it, as far as I know, in Bedford. And
really?
it's, again, one of the rules that I inherited, if you will. And I hesitated to change that rule because I had several other bigger fish to fry, as I'm saying. The voter ID coming in and really coordinating the election, I didn't want to change that requirement or whatnot, or challenge it, if you will. I'm prepared to challenge it now. Because I don't think it's a requirement that we should stick to, because I do think it infringes upon somebody's First Amendment right for free speech, and more importantly, political free speech, which is especially protected under the law.
Now, is there a rule against people who are actually working inside the poll? Or is it just an accepted practice that they won't wear buttons or regalia?
Right. There's actually 3 different statutes in New Hampshire that apply to what's called electioneering, and encompassing an electioneering is this notion of either campaign pins or stickers or walking with a sign or whatnot.
Sure.
One talks about campaign workers themselves, so that's a separate rule that would apply to the general public.
So they have to be so many feet outside the doorway and not impede people walking in and that kind of thing.
And that's the one for the general public. I'll get to in a moment. But then the third one is to any elected official or state official who's actually on the ballot or who's working in the election, area.
Okay.
And now I have to make a distinction between what the statute talks about the polling place and whether the polling place incorporates the whole campus of the Bedford High School.
Yeah.
Okay. So the law in New Hampshire says that you cannot have any impediment to the voters actually going into
the building.
And it does talk about the building itself, and you have to have a 10-foot pathway, if you will, into the building.
Okay.
What I interpret the polling place is actually when you're walking into the gym itself.
Yeah, I would too.
It's not the building, it's not the parking lots, it's not whatever. So in New Hampshire it says that you can not have that 10-foot swath, and it actually in Bedford we have a town ordinance that says that there can be no campaigning, which would include holding signs or talking to people or passing out literature with 150 feet of the polling place. Once again, I interpret that to mean
like
the doors of the gym.
Lot or something, wouldn't it?
If you remember when we were in McKelvey, they would have them further off in the parking lot. And that made sense because there was no way when you had that entry into the gym.
It was kind of tight at McKelvey.
You couldn't have 10
there
feet.
wasn't room,
What I did a little differently is, as people would notice, I actually set up 2 different sides of that walkway for people to have the signs, which distributed them that way. And then I had the cones go out further, so they can't come out onto the sidewalk, which would allow the voter to walk down. But the 10-feet margin is when you now take the corner to go into the building. You can't have anybody sitting there with a sign.
At the doorway,
I had seen in past elections at the high school, and the thing that scratched my head and said, I don't know if you should be able to do that, is people actually coming up to people as they're coming through the doors and say, hey, do you want to sign this petition? Hey, do you want to sign up to, that really infringes upon that 10-foot, width way. And so I didn't allow that. I pushed that back. But I also took the position that once you get beyond those cordoned off areas, so now we're way off on either side of the parking lot, if somebody wants to be handing out literature or whatnot there, I did not say that that was prohibited. And that's one of the criticisms.
Would you be able to? I mean, would that be against the law for you to say you cannot
and here's where it comes down to.
Anything?
There are 10 states in the United States that have specific rules that talk about can't wear a campaign pin or other type of material identifying a preference for a candidate into the polling place. Vermont being
as
one
a voter.
of them, as a voter, any public person, okay? They have those
who's
specific
going to play
laws.
cop at the door? Take that pin off,
Well, that's what we do, and that's what we have done, and we have told people to take the pins off.
In Bedford?
The election workers in Bedford.
Oh,
there's about 5 occasions in this past election where we told, and I felt really, really bad.
As they were going in to vote themselves.
Yeah, I had somebody come up to me and say, Mr. Shaughnessy, there's somebody in line over there that has a campaign button. Now, the person bringing it to my attention knew that I was applying this rule both to Republicans and Democrats. It was equal. But I felt bad because I went up and it was a 9-year-old girl, maybe 10-year-old, maybe 11-year-old, but she was a young girl there to vote with her father.
Parents,
and she was showing the pride of, And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not allowed. And the father's looking at me, are you serious? I know we just have that, white
kids
in the
like to
polling
even
place.
put a bumper sticker across their T-shirts or something. They think it's fun.
And so in this day and age where, people's level of political discourse is very low, their political awareness is very low, we want more participation, I felt really bad going up to this little girl who came with her father, was excited to be there,
Was she
excited to show
terrified?
public. No, of course. That was very,
A lot
very
of
polite
kids
and
would be
professional,
like,
of course.
"Oh,"
No, they took it off right away.
Yeah.
But that's one of the problems.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, seriously, a kid walking in with a pin or a bumper sticker like that's going to influence you and me who we're going to vote for. I mean, that's just plain silly.
And I would say many, if not most, of the towns in New Hampshire do that. And when I've looked at this issue after, when it came up, it is. So going back to the 10 states that actually have laws that allow you to do that, I mean, I would argue that those laws could be stricken as being unconstitutional. I have some legal arguments for that. But now we go one step further in New Hampshire. New Hampshire does not have a particular law. The law against electioneering talks about a candidate or a representative of the candidate. Okay?
Well, that's
to me,
different than
that's
just
a campaign
somebody
worker.
going in to walk to vote.
Correct. To me, that means if you're standing out there holding a sign or whatnot, you can't just wander into the gym in the public areas with a sign or whatnot.
Yeah.
And so, to me, there is no state law in New Hampshire that's strong enough that that'll allow me as a moderator to exercise that rule if I'm challenged. Now, you asked me, does the moderator have the power? And the answer to that is yes. Moderator has the power to do anything in the polling place itself if whatever the activity is impinging upon other people's right to vote. So, for example, if somebody was out in the public area saying, hey, hey, vote for so-and-so, hey, vote, obviously that's not allowed, and I could go and say, no, you can't do that, or we could remove you from the gym area. So the moderator has overall discretion to determine what is an impediment to the voters, what's a distraction to not only the voters, but the election workers who have to be paying attention to what they're doing. And that's a wide discretion, okay? So do you have the power?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're asserting that power against somebody's fundamental First Amendment rights to political speech, that's where I have a problem. I don't think as a moderator you should be exercising your discretion that way, and I think it could be challenged. So,
and I would imagine just by virtue of people, I don't know, feeling as though somebody else doesn't have the right to tell them how to dress or whatever. I mean, I can imagine people that if you went up to them and said, I'm sorry, but you have to remove that button, that they'd be highly insulted and maybe want to argue with you about that. Like, you have no right to tell me what I'll wear.
and I know people have in the past. They didn't argue with me. I had maybe 2 or 3 that came to my attention, but I know another election workers actually caught people at the door and politely asked them to, remove it. I've heard stories in the literature and even through the Bedford workers where they've asked people, so what are you going to do when you have a T-shirt on? You're going to make me take my T-shirt off and go in with no shirt on?
Yeah.
No, you go into the bathroom and put it on backwards, inside out, or you put a jacket over it or cover it in some way, shape, or form. But that's what they did in the past. That was the rule, and really there was support for that in the Secretary of State's election procedure manual. There was not directly saying that, but support for that type of exercise of discretion.
Well, I mean, I can see it if it's, if it was outrageous. Like if 10 people happened to come in all at once, and they all had those straw hats with the bumper stickers on them and the T-shirts, and they walked in as a group, by the way, just to vote. Well, I mean, that would be kind of an outrageous display. But, I mean, if somebody walks in who happens to have something on that favors the candidate that maybe they were out at 5 in the morning for, passing out signs or whatever, I mean, what's the big deal?
Well, like any rule that you set or any law that you pass, there's always here's the line, and everybody tries to get up close to the line. The problem with this is, as you say, 10 people walking in with straw hats and big, flashing lights, vote for so-and-so. Obviously, even though they're there to vote, that could be distracting, and that could be an attempt to influence people. Now, if I'm just a voter wearing a pin, am I attempting to influence you, or am I showing everybody what my allegiance is? And if that's not disruptive, and if we have such thin skin in the society, that somebody wearing a pin is somehow intimidating me to vote for their candidate, I mean, come on. I mean, we're in New England. We have, town meetings. And,
I mean, if you wanted to carry that to the biggest extreme, somebody declaring Democrat or Republican could be seen as electioneering, correct?
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and it's something that I haven't brought into Bedford because I looked at it and I thought it was kind of going overboard. They talk about when you have these, we have voting machines that actually count the ballots. And when I'm having a voter come up, I ask them, you can put it in either way, but I prefer you put it face down. Why? Because I don't want to see how you vote. I want to, have the integrity of the privacy. But they go one step further when you have a primary. They have to then ask you if you're Republican or Democrat. And then you have a different colored. So now you're displaying to the world what your party affiliation is or whatnot. But they talk about privacy screens, having actually a folder to put the ballot in so somebody can protect what somebody else is going to see how you vote.
For goodness
but they don't
sakes.
talk about the problem of when you walk up to the table for the ballot clerk, you have to announce your name is. And in a primary, they have to say Democrat or Republican.
Correct.
So it's public knowledge and what. So you have to use a little bit of common sense.
I mean, that would be so silly, handing us all folders and so on. I mean, how ridiculous.
So the issue,
is anybody doing that?
Not that I know of. I don't know if anybody has those privacy screens or whatnot. But the issue is, should I stop that 9-year-old girl from coming into the polling place with a pin on?
And somebody actually complained.
I don't know.
I mean, is this somebody who had nothing else to do that day? Or
I don't know if it was a complaint or they were alerting it to me because I had some people there who were watching from the national parties. And if they saw that go through, maybe I would have got nicked. So I think somebody brought it to my attention as opposed to, hey, tell her to remove that. I think they just brought it to my attention saying, I just want to let you know there's somebody in, the C and D line that has, a campaign sticker. I can't even remember if it was, for Romney or Obama. I really don't know.
That's just plain silly as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. But the secondary issue becomes, all right, then you have the literature, as you said, handing the literature out.
Excuse me. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, obviously, if you wanted, could you say to people outside, you can't hand out anything? Are you allowed to do that?
I could. I do believe I could. I believe in the law, it says that the moderator can make sure that the voter has an unimpeded path into the polling place. Mm-hmm. And that's why you'll see I actually moved all the civic organizations out of that front area into the back. Mm-hmm. That was one of the reasons.
I saw that, yeah.
One of the reasons I did that is just the confusion that people had and the log jam up front and whatnot. But because of that requirement that they have to have unimpeded access, and hey, my kids we were actually cookie mothers, my wife was, for the Girl Scouts, so I have nothing against the Scouts or whatnot, but when they come up to somebody and ask about their bake sale or whatnot as they're heading into the gym, a lot of voters just didn't want that, and lo and behold, you look in this little manual here, it says you shouldn't have that. That was discouraged. So that's one of the changes. So
that's like almost universal.
Right.
That somebody's selling cookies or cupcakes or something on election day,
But that comes under the moderator's job is to make sure the voter has that unimpeded access. If they want to just go vote and come out, and as you saw, the exit that I had the last time comes out and up the hallway. Again, you can bypass that civic place. You didn't have to walk by them and feel bad because you weren't donating to this or that. So that was part of it. But that is part of the moderator's duty and job to be able to say what causes a distraction or what causes impeding access. So could I take it to the extreme and say all the parking lots, all the parking areas, or anybody on the school grounds is within my control? Yes. I think that goes too far. Now, if people were coming up and being obnoxious and stopping people and arguing with people, the police could actually get involved in that, but I could get involved. But I took the position at the last election, there were people handing out campaign literature really by the main entrance of the high school. As people were walking by from the lower parking lots, they were handing out literature. I had a twofold complaint by that. One was, why are you allowing that to happen? And the second was, well, they're leaving it in the polling booth. And for the second one, I said, well, that's easy. I had 10 students throughout the day sweeping them on a regular basis. When I saw them standing around, I go, shh, and they go and precisely that, to take any type of literature out of because you can't have that in the gym. But the second thing, when you're talking about having people out in those areas, I said to the gentleman who actually got very upset with me that day, he said, well, why are you doing that? We've never had that before. Well, everybody I talked to says, yes, we have had that before, okay? But two, I said, because they have a First Amendment right. It's their right to free speech. And by me saying, even though you're being very polite and not impeding anybody, getting aggressive, I'm going to impinge upon your right to free speech just for a rule. So I didn't feel comfortable doing that, and I allowed that to happen. And that's why I'm glad you welcomed me on the show for this very point. I've been asking people, I wanted to get feedback. I have some very strong feelings because I like to protect people's constitutional rights, and I like to protect the First Amendment right. I always say, my paralegal gets a chuckle out of it, and I'll modify what I usually say. I say everybody has a constitutional right to be a jerk. I use the A word when I'm saying to her.
Yes,
okay,
this is true.
Now what does that mean?
Yes.
That means you might not like my opinion. But I have the right to tell you.
I have no right to stifle you.
And so you have a constitutional right to be a jerk. Why? Because I have a constitutional right to state my opinion. That is of heightened importance when you're talking about political speech. The very reason for the First Amendment is so we can yell at the people who are running the show.
I agree with you.
Our politicians are what? It's the very foundation to the democracy. If we can't complain to them without fear of retribution, and that's the very essence of the First Amendment. So you take free speech, with everybody knows what free speech is, but if you really do a study on it, it really is political free speech is what the First Amendment's all about. So you have two fundamental interests now. Your right to vote, which again, bedrock of democracy. First Amendment right, bedrock. So why am I infringing on somebody's right to First Amendment if it's not that much of an infringement of their right to vote, if they have to pass by somebody who happens to be handing something out? They can say no thank you. It might be a bother, I understand.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know,
You don't have
would
to
I
take
want
it.
them to do that? No. I prefer them not to do that. So don't take that as, hey, welcome, come on, hand it out. But you know what? Some people get mad when that happens. And so the candidate has to take that into consideration. If your workers are getting the people mad, they might just say, well, forget that. So getting back to the second point, though, when they say, well, those campaign literature should not even walk into the gym with people, and I'm like, how am I supposed to say that? I mean, you see people with the BTA flyers all the
Yeah,
time. They go in,
well, I was
it's a
just going to
guide,
say
you know.
that because, I mean, in Bedford, certainly,
Yep.
the BTA sends it out for every election.
Yep.
And a lot of people do bring it simply so that they can vote faster, particularly if it's a long ballot and they've given thought ahead of time. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, and I saw it working at the polls. There are people who sit down and obviously have never read it before, and an hour later they're finally done voting.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I want to go in, do my vote, get out. So I make it a point to know what's on the ballot ahead of time and have my mind made up. And I think a lot of people do, and use that as kind of their personal cheat sheet so that they'll remember when they thought it out that, you know, Article 1 or whatever, they're going to vote yes, Article 2, they're going to vote no. I mean, if you really followed some of these rules to the 100th degree, you'd almost have to say to people, well, you can't bring in your little personal reference as to what, you know, the issue or what an organization is telling you is a good idea or what have you.
Yeah. Well, certainly they
I mean,
shouldn't
that
be
would
left
be crazy.
behind. They shouldn't be left behind in the
Oh,
voting
if it's
booth or
blank,
whatnot.
it's not a big, well, yeah,
You know,
because they're recommending, yeah.
Right. They are
yeah,
recommending, and
yeah.
that certainly is electioneering.
But what if they're not recommending? What if it's just simply a, you know, for your convenience, we're providing you in advance with everything that's going to be on the ballot?
Whether it's one or the other, I take the same position. I am not going to take anything away from a voter that that they want to bring with them that's not causing a distraction to somebody
Yeah,
else.
I mean,
The
exactly.
whole idea of electioneering is your attempt to influence somebody else's vote in the polling place. And if I have a handful of campaign literature or the BTA cheat sheet or whatever else, and I want to bring it in there to assist me to vote, my fundamental right to vote, and I'm not hurting anybody else, then I think that's allowed. But it
And
is
how
within
do
my
you,
discretion.
I mean, how would you stop it? Are you going to subject every woman to a handbag search and a guy to, you know, checking his pockets and everything to see if he has a piece of paper in there?
Yeah, it gets absurd. That's absurd.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't believe, though, that people actually complained.
Not
that
too
to
many.
Me just is,
Not too many, but I just love the issue because it's something that I was looking at before, and I was scratching my head, and it's because I got, before the election, I got this a copy of the law enforcement memorandum set out by the Attorney General's office, and it set me off because it alerted actually the police departments, and I had gotten a copy, about potential protests on the voter ID law. And they had something in here.
were there any in the state?
Not in
Bedford.
Not
but
in Bedford.
Do you know if there were other
don't know.
places? No, I don't know.
I know
either.
individual voters who had their own personal protests.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, there was no organized protest anywhere,
No.
was there?
But here it says, people may choose to express their opposition to the voter ID law by holding signs inside the polling place.
Inside?
Yeah.
Really?
This is permissible so long as the signs do not interfere with the voting process. Now again, that's the overlying theme.
Yeah.
If you don't interfere with the voting
Yeah.
process, it's okay. Now, I would never allow anybody to hold a sign inside my polling place.
Yeah.
Because I think by the
that-
very nature of holding a sign
Well, yeah.
is influence the voter, so by
Yeah.
definition, that's prohibited. But then, what is the polling place? So if they're outside the gym, if you strictly construe some of these things the way people want you to, then we shouldn't be holding signs outside by the door. Shouldn't be there, because you are
That's a
electioneering.
point, too, yeah.
Why
Well,
are you
okay,
sitting there
well,
with a sign? You are trying to influence my vote.
Yeah.
Okay, so get them off the school property, send them over to Riley Field.
I mean, obviously,
ridiculous, too.
as every politician will admit to, if you're walking in undecided and you see four of your friends with so-and-so sign who said, oh, you know, vote for him, he's so great, you'll love him when you meet him and so on, then maybe at that last minute you're saying, oh, all right, I'll vote for him or her.
And that is electioneering. I
Yeah.
mean, when I
Oh,
was out
yeah.
there holding
Yeah, it
signs at
is.
various campaigns, I would have people come up and say, all right, what do you think about this person, that person? You know,
Sure.
they're checking my
Yeah,
opinion.
especially,
you
yes,
know?
they know you.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, were there any complaints from the candidates themselves or, you know, their handlers or whatever about any of the, you know, the rules or incidents of signs or literature or buttons or whatever? Or was all this just more the public kind of carrying on?
Well, it was one of the complaints from the Democratic side, somebody who was over with the Democratic Party. And it wasn't Jerry Hauser, it was somebody else who was out there who was complaining that the Andy Sanborn campaign were handing out these literature. They were handing it out, out in the parking lots and on the grounds. So that was the complaint. I actually was out in front because as moderator I would go out and I'd look at the parking lot. I'm just doing a survey, and I'd walk back in and whatnot. One of my tours outside just to see what's going on. That's one of the complaints I had. Then another complaint that I got.
But there was no set rule that Sanborn's people couldn't do it, right?
Correct. That's why
They weren't.
somebody wasn't pleased with my interpretation, saying no, that's permissible as long as they don't come in to this area, and if they're in this area, they have to be behind those barrels. That's the zone that I protected the voters from. Okay, but then there was another observation that again somebody was holding political signs. I won't call it by the front door, but people who are familiar with the school complex, by the theater is the roundabout, okay, the round entry. Well, people were actually coming in that entry because they were parking down.
I remember, because it was busy.
Yeah, but that wasn't the official entrance. And so I had people actually holding signs by that door, and I asked them to move. Because even though it wasn't the official entrance, by them, being there, people thought it was the official entrance. And so people were using it. I wasn't inviting people through that door.
Yeah, that's true, too.
Frankly,
and I'm sure the school department would have frowned on hundreds of people kind of walking through the whole building trying to find their way over to the gym. And if you've never been in there, it could be confusing. Yeah, you would. Yeah, you could go down the wrong corridor and be merrily on your way to Lurgio or whatever.
Those doors were kept open at my request because I wanted the campaign workers to park their cars way down in the front, not in the back where I wanted the voters in the back area, but I didn't want at the end of the night or during the day for them to have to walk all the way around the building, which is dangerous. There's no sidewalks in some place, but in the dark. So I had that open so they could do that, but people were coming in. And when we had, at lunchtime, we had the longest lines. People were coming there all the time, through the front, but I'd rather them do that than actually walk all the way around. So we just allowed it to happen.
Yeah, because you're right. There are no sidewalks there, and some people are very impatient and don't pay attention, or they're yakking on the phone, or what have you.
So hopefully people will get it now. We have a one-way, and if you have a walking
now that was
impediment,
different, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't one-way before. If my memories, and you found that worked way better.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I needed, and it did get fixed at around 11 o'clock. If you were there at 7 in the morning or to 11, you probably had a different experience. But 11 o'clock, when I saw that people were just coming in and they saw cars parked, and, oh my gosh, it's so crowded. I got to find this parking place on the side of the road.
Yeah. And people do that.
But there are plenty of places up back. So I needed the people, the flaggers, if you will. We got the emergency crews out there. We're kept on people come up and cycle them through. But if you had a walking, or, not even, a handicap accessible car, but you could come through, drop somebody off, and then go park your car. If somebody, had a problem with walking or just... So,
or wait a couple of minutes. I mean, now I didn't really run into any huge problems because we went, for the final election, I really don't remember what time we went down in September. I honestly don't. But for the November election, we went down around 4 o'clock. So we were, trying to beat that, and I don't even know if it held true in this election, but it always seemed like around 5 o'clock or thereabouts it would get kind of busy as people were on their way home from work, that kind of thing. So we were trying to get in there before that little crunch started.
We didn't have that crunch.
Really?
Yeah, surprising, because that's the conventional wisdom in the past, but what I experienced is...
Do you think maybe people just thought there'd be a crunch, so they made it a point to go earlier?
Here's my theory on this. There was about 400 people in line at 7 o'clock. Before we opened the doors...
I heard that.
We had it down the hall.
Yeah, I heard that.
And we didn't clear that line because there's only so many
people.
I mean, so we cleared that line probably by 7:45 to 8 o'clock, and then it was a little bit more manageable. People could actually get in the gym. It wasn't a line out the door. But I think everybody in that line in the morning got on the Twitter sphere, told their loved ones or whatnot, hey, you better get down early because things are crowded over there. It's crazy down there or whatnot.
Yeah.
And everybody came out really from 11:30 to 1:30.
Isn't that funny?
That's where we had people all the way down the hall.
Because I don't think usually that's the crazy time, is it?
Lunch is usually an uptick. Yeah. But not
I
like
suppose
this.
people who figure get it over with now so they don't have to go after work or whatever if they work locally,
That was unprecedented.
I had heard that lunchtime was very busy there, and I was kind of surprised at that myself.
But 4 to 7, you could have got in, no
Not
problem.
funny.
No
Yeah,
problem.
well, I was surprised. I mean, I thought there'd be more at 4.
Yeah.
I was really kind of surprised that it was really quiet.
Yeah.
You know, and so much so that it didn't get me out of there any faster because I was
Well, you like to
chit-chatting.
yak.
Yeah. You know, I'd see
Poor
this one,
Jerry.
I'd see that one. And I know, because he's usually like, can we go now? You know, do you have to talk to everybody? You know, he likes to go in, get out, go home, eat dinner.
He should have gone for coffee and come back later.
That's what I told him. I said, then go right out in the car. I mean, you don't have to stand here. You know?
Well, it is a social thing, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
I like.
sometimes you bump into people you haven't seen all year.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I mean, I watched that when at work there too, and it is a social thing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, life is busy and
Yeah.
people get otherwise engaged and, you know,
Right. And that'll get us to our next topic later on is, do we go to a second polling place, you know?
Well, you know, that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you a little bit about because, you know, we hear these kind of stories, you know, and I think I might have even asked you about it. That somebody said, oh, there should be a second polling place. And I thought to myself, well, when all these years that everybody complained, you know, that things were tight, and I mean, it was nobody's fault, obviously. I mean, McKelvey did not have the big facility, so if it was a big turnout, obviously there'd be backups. But I mean, with the high school, it would be like, well, here we have this place that's big enough to handle whatever. Why would anybody push for a second polling place? Is it because they don't want to travel to the high school, or what would be the point?
I don't know. I think the comments that I heard, and there was maybe, you know, less than a half a dozen really on voting day, people standing in the line saying, well, why don't we have a second polling place? And, you know, my response is I'm running up and down, yelling and screaming,
this is
going,
in a metropolis. I mean, it's
saying it
Bedford.
has something to do with your tax rate, but, you know,
yeah.
you know, but really the cost is not that big of a deal, but every penny counts. So there are some logistical difficulties and whatnot, but I don't know. Frankly, I see how the town council, it's their responsibility to set up the polling place. That's not the moderator. And for the decision of 1 or 2, they'll ask for my input, but it's their responsibility. It's their vote. If they're asking for my opinion, I'd like to keep it at 1, just for my workers and the, you know.
Yeah, because you'd have to double up workers and everything.
Well, and the supervisor of the checklist.
Yeah.
And then you have the people inevitably showing up at the wrong place. We have this perfect facility. We got this great handicap accessible, adequate parking, although some people were parking on the sides. But I mean, again, that was extraordinary, the election we just had.
Well, yeah. I mean, the presidentials are always going to get kind of crazy.
Right. And if you had 2, all that's going to happen, if you look at what happens in Manchester, they have plenty of polling places, but then they reduce the number of check-in lines and whatnot. So you're not really getting out any faster. So, so I don't think it's broke at this point.
That's what I
fix it?
couldn't understand, why anybody would be talking about it. I mean, if something had gone dramatically wrong, or if our population doubled or something.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's not like it's going to take anybody an hour to get to the polls, no matter where they live in Bedford.
Yeah. And then again, what secondary place would you have?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, McKelvey's so close, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't.
You have a public safety issue. You know, you want to have your resources and make it safe in and out. So I think we focus on making it smoother where we are now, and not split it in 2, because you're going to inevitably have voters going to the wrong place and getting mad.
Oh, yeah,
and,
because how would they divide it, you know? Everything on this side of 101 goes one place and everything on that side goes to another? I mean, how would they even do it?
I think the only way that would make sense is you have one at Memorial, because that's on that side, but I don't know how many voters you'd actually siphon off.
I know.
To have it at Memorial. It would be a smaller polling place. I mean, Merrimack actually did that.
I mean,
They
as
went
the
to
crow
2.
flies, what's the distance? A couple of miles?
Yeah, probably 2 miles, you know. Maybe even less, because you're up 101 that way.
Yeah.
But just geographically, it wouldn't make sense for Peter Woodbury or McKelvey, because it's right down County Road. I mean, so that doesn't make any sense. But I don't know that I don't know that it's a big push. I haven't, in my polling of people, I haven't gotten people to say, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So
now I know you made a couple of changes, because one of the, in fact, it was a campaign issue whether or not all the checkout in the back was needed, and I think it was the day that, probably to your shock, when Bill Greiner and I did a show together a few weeks back.
I heard about that.
Yeah. Actually, we had fun doing it, you know. I think it was on that show. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe he said it on something else. But I know I heard him say that, you know, the election went well, but he was there a long time. But then, of course, he made a joke out of it, saying the only reason he was there a long time is because he was searching for the checkout place and couldn't find it. So I know that, you know, that was something you had said you were going to do and implement it, and you did. So I assume everybody was pleased with that?
I didn't hear anybody objecting, and a lot of positive comments. I'll tell you, in the September election, when I first instituted that change and had the one-way coming in, one-way going out, we had the table at the back as people left so they could change their registration back. So if you were an independent coming in, you get a Republican.
I remember that. Yeah, instead of having to go all the way back up to the front. That was good, because a lot of people were kind of back and forth, like, you know, it was crazy.
But, and this will help with time, but people were looking at that as if it was the checkout line. So I had to have somebody keep on people there saying, no, it's not a checkout line.
They thought they had to go there.
So I'll still keep the, you know, the change of registration down there, because it makes sense.
It does make sense.
If people leave, they come back in and they don't know that they didn't change, they get upset.
Yeah.
So we remind them at every chance we get, and that's there for a reason. So.
And I can remember we used to have to say that to people. Now, don't forget, after you put your ballot in, go back up in front. And some of them would look at us like, huh?
Yeah.
I have to go back up there again? And they wouldn't be thrilled.
Yeah, so I didn't hear anybody.
That worked out well, I take it.
I heard a lot of positive feedback about removing the checkout. And, you know, one of the campaign issues that I had with the checkout is, why are they needed? You don't need them. And that just increases the number of workers that you had. And I pointed out that most people thought that the workers were actually volunteers, but they're not. They're actually paid minimum wage, but they're actually
nobody's going to get rich at it.
Right, and it's not. And people aren't really there for the wage. They're there for the they want to do their civic duty, and that's what I see.
Some of them have been doing it for years. I mean, they even have their favorite. I'm sure you ran into this. Their favorite spot. I mean, what do they get there at 3 in the morning and stake out their favorite chair, or what?
Oh well, that's
my
the other change
that I made. My husband and I used to laugh about it, you know.
That's the other change that I made. That I got very high marks for the workers. Is I came in and they had provided me with several padded chairs. Yeah. Because the players actually, if you go to a game, they have these nice padded chairs that the Booster Club bought.
Oh,
and I said, do you have any more of these? And the maintenance guy says, yeah, we got racks and racks and racks of them.
Oh.
And he had to go check, but I said, do you think we can have each and every
so the workers had padded chairs?
They had padded chairs.
No kidding, because those things used to get pretty bad if you were there for a long time, Right.
One of the ballot clerks had said to me, saying, can you do anything about the chairs? She was kidding a couple, because when I did my training with them on the voter ID, she was kidding about it. She says, no, we always bring our own donut. And
I used to see people coming in with their cushions,
So that was a morning when I was there at like 5:30 in the morning.
Oh, for God's sakes.
I got the janitors to go into the, the other chair.
I bet everybody loved that.
Oh, they loved it.
Yeah, because I mean, those chairs, when you're on them for hours, it's kind of like you
It made sense.
Yeah, you kind of.
Plus, another thing I did is I actually had plenty of chairs there for anybody else who wanted one. I had a public session, but what happened is a lot of times the press would be there. They'd have to be standing there. Another thing I did is I pulled out the bleachers, so it created an area where people could actually sit 2 or 3 rows on the bleachers in the public area. So. And the one way, of course, you saw that I changed that.
And I mean, a lot of people do like to come and watch the count. Yeah. You know, and I mean, obviously, all the candidates, if they're not there themselves, they're going to have their representatives there dying to hear the count and get on the phones and announce it, you know.
It's required when you're doing the absentee ballots that you actually announce it, announce the name, so somebody can be close by and be able to challenge whether that person is really a voter or really absentee.
Did you find were there any problems this year? Were there some of the races were so hot?
No. No, and we had some.
Everybody was satisfied.
We had some Republican watchers or spotters, if you will, from the National Party there watching that process.
From the National, really?
Yep.
Why?
And we incorporated
or did they just go everywhere?
I don't know. You know, we had a team of them there. We actually were feeding them the check-in information. Now, what a lot of voters don't understand is when you come in, we have to call out your name, and it's not so we are able to check it off appropriately. It's to anybody else around can then hear to know, well, hold it, that guy's dead. Hold it, he doesn't live in Bedford. Hold it, this is the wrong ward. They can challenge that voter, but they have to be able to hear the name, and that's why you have to call it out a second time. There's a requirement that it does twice. Now, what I did in order to keep the log jam from up top is I had them writing down the name, or the actual, not the name, I had the page and the last 4 ID, so we had a running list. So then the parties could come up and collect that list and then mark off they had bought another checklist.
That'd be a lot easier.
So they have to get out the vote. They see who hasn't come here, do they need a ride, and they're on the phone. So, and what it was designed to do was just to keep that challenge process out of the front, and that worked wonderfully. We had cooperation with the Republicans and the Democrats.
Yeah,
that
nobody
worked
fought
out
it.
quite well. Yeah.
And I would think that that had to be a lot faster for them to keep track as well. I mean, when, instead of rifling through
Well, they had
those
their computers
pages.
too now. They had their
I know,
computers.
Yeah,
and then
I know. Yeah, they're all
well,
with
what I
us,
did
yeah.
is, some of the voters may remember this, what I did, I was a madman that day when things were really you can't predict, how many A's or B's are showing up at any
No,
one
of course
time.
not.
The B's had their own line this time. And usually the B's, you're a Benuck, it's usually pretty long. S's are usually pretty long. But there were times when the S's only had 2 or 3 in it.
I know.
And the B's had nobody in it.
I know.
And so what I was doing is I was going over to the L's and the M's,
yeah.
and I said, all right, all L's come with me. And I took the L list, separated it, went over to the B's over there. And
and just shift them around,
And it took a while for the workers out back who were used to getting the B list and because I didn't tell them what I was doing. I said, oh, sorry, I forgot. They quickly
and
caught
I mean,
up. They're
sometimes
good
that
heart
makes
about
sense
it,
to do. Because, and I can remember that happening.
yeah.
You'd see 1 or 2 of the lines and there'd be all these people and they'd be kind of glaring at the workers, thinking that the workers must have been following up because all the rest of the lines didn't have anybody there. And I mean, it was just luck of the draw sometimes.
Oh, no. It was like the S, like I said, is usually out the door because I'm a Shaughnessy, I know.
Yeah.
But there were times when I only had 2 or 3 people in the S line.
Yeah.
But later in the day, you
we
never know.
flew in and out. I mean, literally, the final election, I mean, we were in and out in minutes.
What I did is I did an analysis. I actually did this on purpose. I went and looked at all the registered voters, broke it down by their alphabet, and then paired them.
So you know the numbers for each letter?
The average, yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Hot ticket.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
So I have all the averages right
What are
here.
the biggest letters?
And I broke it out. Actually, I think I brought that information with me. The biggest letters were actually B's were up there, S's were up there. It's probably in some of my
you're going to
worksheets here. Yeah,
don't worry about it. I was just curious.
Here.
But I mean, just off the top of your head, those were a couple of the big ones. Huh?
Oh, yeah. Well, then the problem is when you get to the B's and C's and D's, I had, all right, let's get the average. And I wanted to get it as close to the average per letter.
Yeah.
But if you put the B that has a high number with the C's, that puts it way over the average.
Yeah.
So
did you find you had to change some of the old designations?
Yes.
Because you know how the signs were always A through whatever, you did have to change some of them?
Then I learned my lesson is what I needed to do is just really have I probably have to have a Velcro thing. Or I could just take a letter off and put it over here for a while.
That'll work.
Yeah,
that'll work.
I was the only one who could manage that system because it was in my head. I knew where the L's were. And somebody else was then saying, no, L's, no. Towards the end of the day, I was saying, only I move the lines.
Yeah, really.
Everybody, just let me do it. It worked.
Otherwise, it'd be like, what's that old expression? I don't mean this to sound ethnically derogatory, but the old Chinese fire drill thing, you know what I mean?
It got confusing. I had some voters on L's going over to B and just looking at me, really? No, really, don't worry. Or an L comes in and slips. I always peg the last voter. And so when I see somebody, are you an L? Yeah, well, you're over here. I only have 2 people. No, believe me. Everybody in that line's an L. I just moved them over there 5 minutes ago. You're no longer or shorter. And they're just looking at me like, really? No.
What used to crack me up is when people would get the wrong line.
Yeah.
And they'd come over to you real happy and, you'd ask the name. And like, say I was at B, and then my name is Brian Shaughnessy. And they'd be, excuse me? Because you're like, did you hear it right? And, oh, well, this is the B line. Yeah. Oh, it is? You know what I mean? The letters are kind of like right over the heads of all the workers.
Alphabetical order by last name, not
first? Yeah. It was kind of funny, And I don't know, I mean, maybe just again, not even thinking about it, what I mean? Just kind of doing everything by rote and, your mind's on picking up one of the kids at the game or what's for dinner tonight or what have you. But it used to make me laugh when I'd see people do that. Or if they'd have to think about their address, if you were verifying address. And you'd say in the addresses, and like they'd kind of stop. I mean, it might be somebody who lived there 25 years or whatever,
Well, they change your address. The town just changes the name of your
yeah. Well, if you remember correctly. That was a little situation. I didn't blame you for that. I think there was a teeny bit more to that particular story. But it was like, well, your license in the town says 2 different things, and it's like, well, yeah, because the town changed the street, you know.
I didn't move.
Take it up with the town. Don't take it up with me, you know. Yeah, that was interesting.
That was funny.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just, you know, I didn't argue. I just stood there peaceably and everything, and I thought, well, Brian will be getting an email from me in the morning, and
I
you
did.
did indeed.
Well, I got right to the bottom of it, spoke to everybody
Yeah, you
involved.
answered right away. Yeah, you answered right away. No grape there. And so, I don't know. I mean, here you are. It's a year later. Hard to believe, isn't it? Almost a year since the election. Ever have any regrets?
No. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy, you know, helping the town. I've gotten to know, you know, Laurie. I knew Laurie before.
Okay.
But, I mean, we weren't good friends or anything, but I knew her. And
I got the impression she was much more involved this year.
Yes,
in
and
the
that was my intent.
Yeah.
One of the things, and I think that, you know, Rick Bullock had been doing it for so many years, he kind of kept things tighter to the vest, so only he knew certain things. And what I want to do is I want to really have, it's really a town function. It's the clerk and the council that are involved in doing that. The moderator is supposed to be the chief election official really for the day of the polling place and other duties, but I wanted Laurie to become more involved and the town people to become more involved and brought them in. I brought the supervisors of the checklist more in as a team. So we had meetings with the supervisors and Laurie and myself, and you know, we have a team approach.
Well, that's good. You know what I never understood is why there has to be a moderator for schools and a moderator for the town. I've never quite understood the mentality behind that.
Yeah, it's kind of a curious thing when people, you know, talk about their different budgets, you know.
Yeah, but what's that got to do with the moderator? I mean, it's still the election.
Yeah, well, you need to have the moderator, the school moderator there's a separate school budget meeting, which is tomorrow night. We're taping this on Monday, February 4th or 5th, is it 5th? Yeah.
4th, right?
Yeah.
So, 4th.
So we're going to be, we're going to have a Tuesday night, tomorrow night is going to be the deliberative session, which is a separate meeting than the town meeting.
Yeah.
And then when you have the vote, in order to verify the vote, that's what the moderator does at the end of the election, I verify it to the state, the school district moderator. But you're right, why can't that be the same person?
I mean, what if the two of you went into this with totally different ideas?
Yeah. Yeah, what I'm actually pretty excited about is Bill Klein, who was the only person who signed up for the school district moderator. Bill came to me, he called me actually after I got elected. I didn't know Bill, but he was a school district moderator for the town of Merrimack for years and years.
Really?
And for those of you who have been in New Hampshire for a while, if you remember in Merrimack, they had those, I'll call the religious wars. They had these huge meetings having to do with the curriculum and books, and they had overflow sites to have, you know, videotape the meetings.
This would have been at their town meeting and everything?
Yeah, very contentious. And Bill was the guy who was actually coordinating all that. But what he did over there is he would actually be the assistant town moderator and the school district moderator, and the town moderator would fill in him. So they were basically acting as a team for the election, because you do need to
which would make sense,
right. And so that's how I envisioned that Bill and I will deal with it. And Bill was very instrumental. I made him an assistant moderator because he called me up and wanted to get involved.
And he's got the experience.
He has the experience, the knowledge base, and he's just a great guy, good personality, and he just loves doing it. So
and he's the only one on the ballot?
Only one on the ballot.
Well,
so
then
we're
I guess
fortunate
we
that he
can
stepped
say
up.
he's going to be our next school moderator, right?
So we'll be able to work hand in hand together, and I'll be able to, you know, have him jump in if I can't be there, or the other way around.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, it would be crazy if there were two different. And I mean, frankly, and I mean, I can get away with saying this, and I don't even expect you to comment. But given a lot of the craziness of last year's election, that was one of the concerns I had. That I have heard Rick Bullock make comments. I've seen quotes of his in the news where he has said things to that the two of you are so divergent. You know, how would you work together? And I mean, my thinking was, well, I mean, how can you be divergent on an election? I mean, it is what it is. You know, this is the way an election happens. Yeah. But I mean, the thought that was in my head was, does this mean that there's going to be some kind of chaos or ego war or whatever going on? You know?
Not from my end of this. Believe me, I have a healthy ego, but I don't exert it on other people.
You don't have any ego. You're so mild-mannered.
That's called professional. But you know, I did see that letter that he sent to the editor, and it was on.
That's where I saw it. Yeah.
And he said that Bedford would not be well served with two moderators at the March election. On March 12th, that would have divergent opinions or diametrically opposed. Or I don't know how he phrased it. I frankly don't know what he's talking about.
I mean, I had
other
a hard
the
time making sense
personality
of that.
issue,
Yeah.
if you will. And I didn't really talk to Rick Bullock directly, other than in passing during the election. He took issue with Bill Greiner, who's a good friend of mine, and I said on your show, and as well as others, Bill Greiner had his own agenda, and had those signs went up because Rick Bullock put up signs against Bill Greiner when he was running for council. People forget about that, but that was payback. It was it was payback, pure and simple. And I said, I don't control Bill Greiner. If I did, I'd be the mayor of Bedford. I can't control him. But
I don't think any candidate can totally control anybody who's working for them.
Nor
we've all seen that, certainly, that now and then, and I'm not talking about with you and Bill, but I mean, we've all seen campaigns where a campaign worker might have done something that the candidate would go, oh my God, and wind up with a problem,
Yeah, but what I was disappointed with, Kathy, is afterwards, again, I don't think we're diametrically opposed on any particular issue that is relevant to the election or running Bedford. I think I was very complimentary of Mr. Bullock, of how he's read it in the past, and I thought he had, he ran a good election. Bedford does it right, always ran a good election, and he was certainly part of that team. I think I put more emphasis on the team, and he always talked about his staff, and I could never understand what his staff meant. But you shouldn't have a staff as a moderator.
I know.
But so maybe we had a different point of view on that. But I was disappointed that after the election, I reached out when he defeated me the first time, and I went up and I congratulated him and got spit in the face, basically.
Did you hear from him?
No, he never did. He never reached out afterwards. And I talked to Roy Stewart and other people, and I said I'd love to have Rick involved in some way because he's got all the institutional knowledge. I'd love to reach out to Rick and whatnot, but he basically,
so
once again, spit in my face afterwards. So
no handing over of the mantle, so to speak, at all.
No, he didn't become involved. And he said that he always had the town's best interests at heart, and I would think that if that was the case, he would have actually contacted me and helped me through a very difficult election.
And
I would have welcomed him.
And I mean, a professional attitude, or just in the spirit of mankind, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it is customary, no matter how wild a race gets, and no matter how somebody is disappointed about losing, that phone call is usually made,
right?
And you say, hey, congratulations. And even if you don't mean it, you do it.
Right.
It's just good fun.
And he made it clear in this press right afterwards. He'd go, congratulate Bill Greiner, and he called me something like his gnome or something like that. So it was not a flattering name he used for me.
No, and there's
I don't know him personally at all. So we've never had an argument in public.
There's no need for that. I mean, keep the dialogue to the issue, and there's no need to really. And I mean, that was, as you well know, and Bill Greiner well knows, that was why I was critical of him, because I felt that, he was making personal remarks too. I mean, people are grown up, and it's not that anybody's stupid, it's not that anybody's unintelligent, and you can make your point without getting down into the personal, let's bloody somebody's nose, I mean, certainly I kind of didn't give you a cakewalk when you were on my show. I asked you a couple of questions that you probably sat there and thought, nice, glad I came with her, But I mean, the point is, at the end of the show, we shook hands. We said we'd get together for lunch someday. It took us a while, but we ultimately did. And it wasn't personal. It was political. It was a vivid exchange of ideas.
I love a good debate.
Yeah, but you don't spend
I
the
hope
rest
to
of
have Justice
and
Thomas
I mean,
actually ask the questions.
You're a lawyer. So I mean, you've, I'm sure, gone into courtrooms and, punched it out with somebody and then went out to lunch.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it is.
Very often.
Yeah. You can't make it a personal cause for the rest of your life. You have to move on, and you have to say it is what it is. There's no point to hating each other and spending the rest of your life downgrading each other. And, I think you know that. I know that. Questionable whether everybody knows that.
Well, I hope to never have to get to that point where I have to call people names or, resort to that type of politicking, if you will. So
no, and I will say, you did not personally do it during the campaign. You did not.
Well, thank you.
No, I mean, you didn't. And if I thought you did, I'd say so.
You would. You tell it like it is.
There you go. Well, there were people who wondered how we could possibly, including us, talk about an election for almost an hour. Look at that clock.
Looks like we're here.
Hey, we are here. We are at 58 minutes, so it's time for us to kind of bid adieus and all that. And let's do another show, as other things.
I'd be happy to.
I want to have you come on. I want you to come on and tell us all about the excitement of standing there before the Supreme Court.
Oh, I'd love to.
That would be a hoot.
Yeah, I got a lot of
Do you get
nice
to take
little
pictures
stories.
of that or not?
No, actually,
No?
you know, you can go on the New Hampshire Supreme Court website, and they have all the audio and video. So I had an argument there on January 16th. You can go on there now and actually watch the argument.
But the U.S. Supreme Court?
You see the back of my head.
I mean, like
my
if your
arm's
wife
going
wanted
like
to
this,
go down and take a picture, can't she?
She can't. No,
Oh,
they
too
have
bad.
audio,
Yeah.
and you can listen to the audio, but no video.
Oh, send it to me and we'll put it on, you know, Patch or something.
Yeah, the audio will
fun.
be, I don't know how long it takes to get up onto the website, but like in New Hampshire now, it will stream live. You can actually listen
Neat.
to live as it goes, and then it takes a while for them to get it into the archive, and you can watch it.
Well, now I look at the clock and I can see in the corner of my eye the director waving like stop. So we got to end it, Brian.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks for
Thank you
being
inviting
here,
me
and
to
we'll
your
see
show.
you soon.
See you at the
and
polls.
you got to hear Brian. He told it like it is, which is what this is about. Till next time, bye-bye.